The following podcast is being brought to you by the Defy Life Podcast Network.
Welcome to Aftergate, powered by the Defy Life Network.
Are y'all ready?
Aftergate is a podcast series highlighting Colgate alumni of color in their professional endeavors aftergate.
Are y'all ready?
Aftergate is hosted by Alvin Glimpf, aka Al, and Herman Dubois, aka Jerry.
Are y'all ready?
We are doing Aftergate because Colgate University has produced innovators who have changed the world every day, yet many alumni of color and the mainstream Colgate community are unaware of the amazing accomplishments of alums of color.
Are y'all ready?
Welcome. And I say it like that because I feel like I haven't said it in a long time. But that's just because it is season 2's first show and we are back from break. So this is Aftergate. So I appreciate all the listeners. And this is your boy Al. I'm with my co-host, homeboy, good friend, brother, hermano for 1987, right? So we go back. So, what's up, homie?
What's going on, my brother? All is well. Back for another season. Blessed with the momentum we've been able to sustain from our first season. Incredibly well received across the board from administration, from AOC, brothers and sisters we know, brothers and sisters we don't know, and even from some of the students of color on campus now that are followers and supporters. And so really looking forward to what this next season has to bring. And of course, in the Aftergate way, we're going to start off season 2 with a bang. We've got some amazing guests lined up for this next season. And, we're excited.
And I appreciate you hinting at our intentionality in choosing our leadoff guest, because we did 23 shows last season. But for those who don't know who our first guest of season 1 was, Miss Diane Ciaccone, you know the reverence of that sister. So therefore, we're going to come with another heavy hitter to start off season 2. But let's just remind those, because I'm sure we got new listeners. We done got right up in the Colgate magazine. So there might be people listening to this show who have no real idea what Aftergate is all about. Mm-hmm. So for those who don't know, Aftergate is a weekly podcast co-hosted by myself, Mr. Dubois, and it's all about amplifying, lifting up the stories of Colgate alumni of color, some of the best alumni Colgate has ever produced. That's what we've done season 1. We're only going to get bigger and better in season 2. As we think about season 1 real quick, Jerry, anything you want to lift up, a takeaway, a word, a thought?
I think one of the things that was echoed throughout the season that, we sort of had identified that as we were planning, but then it was echoed by many of the guests, was that we really don't know how big and how far this podcast will grow and how many folks it will reach. We've continued to be surprised with the feedback from folks and how folks the show has resonated with folks, how it's been therapeutic, how it's really made folks reflect on not only their Colgate experience, but where they're at now as an alum, and in some cases even triggered many folks to re-engage with Colgate after decades of being disconnected. So I think that has been a truly uplifting element of season 1, that even though we had an idea, we didn't know to what magnitude, and that's been great. The fact that the administration has embraced us in the way they has, we really didn't know, and that we were asking for permission, but we really didn't know how that was going to go. And you mentioned already the story that was written in the Colgate magazine. We're in talks about the potential of a live show on campus in this upcoming year. So, there's a lot of exciting parts. But I think that ultimately we remain humble in this, because it's just about telling the stories that haven't been told. And the fact that we can be a part of doing something special to uplift the brothers and sisters who came before us and were the trailblazers, and continue to kind of pass the baton on to the next generation of Colgate alumni of color. As far as I'm concerned, our ministry is working. Our ministry is working.
I couldn't have said it better myself. So I'm not going to add on at all to that thought. You covered it all, my brother. I feel like it's time to welcome our guests into the room, onto the show. I would like to welcome recently appointed to U.S. District Court, class of '89. Please welcome to our show, Miss Angel Kelley.
Yeah.
Good evening. Well, it's great to see both of you and to connect with the Colgate community. I think it's great what the two of you are doing. And so let's get to it.
That's what I'm talking about. So as always, I always just like to, for the people I do know, I always like to reflect back onto like my memories of them at Colgate. And what I really remember, what I really remember about you though, is that we all had different circles. And while you weren't, say, directly in my circle of people I ran with consistently, you were connected to people that I ran with in your class. And I really just remember you as a good person with a good soul and just someone who liked to have a good time, like just had a good spirit and good energy about them. That's what I remember about you. So I guess I remember a woman that was, who stood up for what was right, but also, just was a good person to know. So,
well, if I can reflect a little bit,
please,
I think that everything you said was accurate. Nothing about that inaccurate. But I do think that, some of my recollection, and we've echoed this as well with some of our other guests, in that the class of '89 was a special class for us.
Yes.
We were a class of '91. And so we're talking about upperclassmen that were, in their junior year, in our freshman year. And they, in many ways, took us under their wing. And many of us had different scenarios with some of our upperclassmen that, let's just say, they showed us the ropes. And I have to include Angel Kelley in that cohort of class of '89. There's a handful of y'all, Ruth Chappé, Dave Crittenden, Jamal Young, these were all upperclassmen that, and it goes on, the more I think about it, the longer my list will go, but there was something very special about some of these individuals that not only showed me the ropes and tried to give me some guidance, saved my ass a few times in a couple of different situations that I am, at the time was too arrogant to understand the magnitude, but in hindsight, truly appreciate that sort of big brother, big sister mentor that they didn't have to take on, but they took on to really just give us some gems of wisdom that really made a big difference in my first year at Colgate and basically carried with me throughout the duration of my time there. And the true testimony of it was to be able to pass it on to other underclassmen. But that's, one of the greatest memories I have of Miss Kelley. And she served in an administrative capacity, because I believe she was, correct me if I'm wrong, you were the HR O'Brien complex.
I was my last year.
Right. And my sophomore year, I was freshman and sophomore year, I was in HRC. And we won't get into, reliving those 2 years, but HR is a critical connect, as they say now, the plug to have in a couple scenarios that I truly appreciate, even though it was some time ago. So thank you.
I was wondering if you were in Park, because I was the resident advisor in Park in my junior year. And we definitely connected in your first year. And then you're right, last year I was the head resident for the Bryan Complex. And what's interesting in those names that you mentioned, Ruth Chappé, Dave Crittenden, we all sort of followed you actually to Columbia. So the double discovery program. After Colgate, I think Dave and Ruth were studying over there. I think you as well. You were leading the double discovery program at Columbia University, hired me as a Saturday teacher, and I've been teaching ever since.
Yeah,
So
that's right. And Steve Williams became one of our full-time counselors.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, we had a whole Colgate crew going on there. So yeah, absolutely. I forgot about that, but you're right.
One of the stories I remember is I was living in Harlem at the time, and I called myself riding my bicycle over to Columbia's campus, and I got halfway. I it was a mistake from the beginning, but I rode my bike. I got over to Morningside Park. I rode it down the hill, and I said I had enough, and I called the taxi. Took off the tire of my bike, put it in the front of the taxi, and next thing I know, I just dumped it on Jerry. I said, Jerry, take it home. Get it home. 'Cause I'm not getting back
Handle
on
this.
the bike.
That's hilarious.
So we go back that far.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Angel, let me go back. Where are you from? Like born where? Like give me,
New
before we
Rochelle,
get
New
to
York.
Colgate, say it again.
New Rochelle, New York, Westchester County.
Nice.
And for many of those in the city, that's not upstate. It's just on the other side of the Bronx.
When you're from the Bronx, you know New Rochelle, but if you ain't from the Bronx, New Rochelle, people start getting like real sort of unsure about where the hell is New Rochelle.
Exactly.
So you come into Colgate in 1985. So do me a favor, give us a sense of what is the world like for you before you get to Colgate? What's the world like in general from your perspective before you get to Colgate?
Well, I would say that I was just trying to be a good student at that point in time. I had started well, let me just start with my background. So I'm half Black, half Japanese. And I was always curious about my Japanese heritage. My mother her intent was to assimilate as much as possible, not really share her culture with me. But I had an interest in it. And recently I found a high school yearbook. And in that, I saw that I was even a part of the Asian club there. But that was one of the deciding factors for me going to Colgate, because they had a Japanese study abroad program. So for me, the schools came down to NYU and Colgate, and I chose to go to Colgate because I thought it'd be a much more conducive environment for me to study. So before Colgate was me trying to be a good student. I was involved in a mock trial team and enjoyed that. So I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. And I discovered that I didn't have to study political science in order to go to law school. So once I got to Colgate, I studied what I really wanted to study, which was my culture, Japanese. And so I studied language, culture, studied abroad in 1987 in Japan. So that's what led me to Colgate, and that's what I was about before Colgate.
How did you hear about Colgate?
Funny story. Well, I was the first to go to college in my family. I have 3 older brothers. My family, mother worked in a supermarket wrapping meat. My father was a truck driver. So there was no one at home to really give me any guidance on it. I was a good student. I wanted to go to Columbia University, and my guidance counselor told me, no, you'll never get in. So he wasn't really a person that I went to for support and guidance. And there was somebody in the neighborhood who had a Colgate sticker on the back of their car window, and that's how I discovered Colgate. That's all she wrote.
Wow. But
I don't think we've heard that version of anyone identifying a bumper sticker. Wow.
That's what it was.
That's a testimony to the value of wearing the hat or putting a bumper sticker on for Colgate. And that's why they put that stuff out there, because it does work. It does work.
Where did you go to high school?
New Rochelle High School.
And so I'm curious, what was the demographics there like? What was the political scene happening in the 80s that, New Rochelle in the 80s is a different place than New Rochelle now?
Yes. I would say it was a similar size as Colgate. I think all the schools that I've attended have been of similar size. The demographics, I think there was more diverse student population, but I can't say considerably more diverse than Colgate. So, we had our pockets of people of color and who were among friends. My classes typically were not with them, but we seem to find a way to find each other, just as we did at Colgate.
So give me a sense of what that transition from a experience like that in high school. You come to Colgate. You were a student who was able to travel abroad. That puts a whole nother experience in terms of how you process Colgate while a Colgate student. But I'm curious, looking back, how would you describe your experience on campus?
It was a lot of fun. I think the Scholars Program was instrumental. I know it changed its name after I was involved with it, but having that summer to make friends, to come in with a group of friends, basically. I think that classmate, my roommate that was assigned may have been jealous of that, but I think they have an easier time adjusting to that environment and making friends, whereas we would have had to search each other out. And if it wasn't for places like HRC, where they put, a pocket of us there, but then spread us out across campus as well. So I was always in the Bryan complex. I think I started off in Park, but my second year I was over at East Hall. But that's what I would say.
So just to recap, so your first year as a freshman, you were in Bryan complex, but not HRC, in Park.
Correct.
And did they still had the dining hall in Bryan complex, right? The smaller dining hall. Yeah. So when you mentioned that your freshman year roommate was a little jealous, were they a student of color that didn't participate in the Scholars Program, or they were not a student of color? Okay.
They were not a student of color. Gotcha. And I don't know how it came about, but she ultimately left the room, and I brought in Michelle Spikes, who I knew from the Scholars Program. We became good friends then, and we became roommates. So it was a great year.
Oh, wow. Look at that. You didn't have nothing to do with her leaving, right?
I don't know if it had anything to do with the fact that I had a white comforter and she played field hockey and she left her cleats on my comforter. I don't know if it had anything to do with that, but I do remember that event.
Anything past that is just a blur. Doesn't really.
Next thing, she was gone. Right. Okay.
I love it. So when you look back at that time, I'm curious to know, what do you look at as some of your accomplishments, personal, academic? Just what are some of the high moments for you at Colgate?
So I would have to say I did 2 study abroad programs. I did the Japanese study abroad program in my sophomore year. And then in my final semester, I did the China study abroad program. So I started to study Chinese toward the end of my time at Colgate. But I would say one of my biggest accomplishments at Colgate would have to be one of my biggest accomplishments in life, which was when I studied abroad in Japan. I told you my mother is from Japan. She left there about age 17, 18 years old, and she had lost contact with her family. And she was all about trying to assimilate, becoming an American. She was naturalized, became a citizen, but she didn't maintain contact with her family. So when I went back, we found my grandmother. So with the assistance of my professor, we wrote letters. We knew the area where my mother grew up, and they first responded and said that my mother had moved to the United States. She had married an American and moved to the United States. Of course, I knew that. So it required some more letter writing, telephone calls, and next thing I know, we get a telephone call that they found my grandmother. And so my mother came back to Japan for the first time. She discovered she had a brother who was the age of my oldest brother. So when my mother had a child and left Japan, her mother had another child. And her mother had remarried to a Shinto priest. Her brother was the same age as my oldest brother. He too was a Shinto priest. And my mother came out to visit. And what was funny is that she was so Americanized that she did not fit in at all. And by that point in time, I had already been there a couple of months. So I had, started to understand that you don't wear the bright colors, you wear your light blues, your grays, your blacks. My mother shows up in a bright yellow pants, yellow and white striped shirt. People were speaking to me more in Japanese than they would speak to her, because she just did not look Japanese in their view at all, because she, didn't know how to dress like a Japanese person. And when we went to meet her mother, she had a number of dresses that she was like house dresses to give to her mother as a gift. They were red and black, they were pink and, other colors. And, her mother said they would basically, that they would think she was crazy if she wore that. So that gift did not go over well. But I would have to say that that's one of the biggest accomplishments at Colgate. It was due to that study abroad program, and one of the things I'm most proud of.
The testament of just the connection, never mind all the academic benefits that came with that, but just the mere fact that you were able to connect generationally. And that you said that your professor helped you with the letter writing campaign. I'm curious, was that something that you strategically had planned to do before even applying for the study group? And, I guess the main focus of wanting to get out there was to like reconnect. We didn't have all these DNA apps and softwares we have now. So that's a different kind of research and a different kind of effort. And the fact that Colgate a professor was a part of that. Can you talk a little about how you even pitched that to the professor? And this is not in the syllabus, but I need to find my grandmother.
That was easy. Professor Aizawa was an awesome professor. It was just a matter of getting it done. Well, where was she born, or where did she live? We knew it was Sendai, Japan, so we'll start writing there. That was not a difficult sell at all.
Okay. It's kind of like how the cleats on the quilt ended up on the comforter, and then next thing you know, it wasn't really a challenge. It just got resolved. We just get there.
Michelle is my roommate. How did that happen? So when you look back at your experience 30 some odd years later, what do you miss?
Well, that time, and I think it's true for anyone, is probably the last time that you can be frivolous. Just have fun. Just, you develop who you are. You don't have your parents telling you what time to get up. You got to go to class. You really develop your own character, who you're going to be at that time when you go away to school. And that's why I always encourage people who have children and, they're talking about whether or not someone stays home, their child stays home or go away to school. I always say go away to school because you become a man and a woman by doing that. And so, that's what was taking place. It was a time when we could we studied and partied. Maybe you worked in there as well. But you didn't have to for the most part, you didn't have to work to pay rent. You didn't have to work to feed yourselves. And, once you leave that environment at Colgate or any college, then you have to be a responsible adult, unless your parents are going to let you come back home, which I never went back home. So that being that frivolous is nice, but it ended then.
Did you work on campus? Did you have a job at all in your 4 years? Where'd you work? Where's some of your...
So I worked at the art gallery,
okay.
And then I was a resident advisor and head resident.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. And then when I went to law school, I worked 2 jobs, as a matter of fact. So it was like working full time and going to school full time. But then, I really had to pay my rent. I wasn't on campus housing.
You've been working 60, 80-hour weeks since you was on work study, huh?
Basically.
So we're going to take a quick pause, allow our sponsor to get some shine, and then we're going to come back and finish up the conversation and learn more about your journey and really how did you get to be who you are right now. We'll be right back.
So this episode is sponsored by Hope Murals. Hope Murals is a nonprofit that provides adolescent youth with an interactive experience of creative expression via an urban arts platform that stimulates both mental and physical development. Please visit their website at www.hopemurals.org to learn more and find ways you can support the work they do.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. It is always good to bring us back after we hear about our sponsor, Hope Murals. For all those who have not taken the opportunity to learn more about what Hope Murals does, make sure you go to their website, hopemurals.org, learn about what they're doing with our youth and urban arts and helping them really just become better people via the platform of arts. If you're interested in being a sponsor, make sure you check us out. Hit us up with an email, aftergatepodcast@gmail.com. Always show some love to our network, the Defy Life Network at godefylife.com. A lot of interesting, empowering, relevant written content. You can go check that out there. If you want to hear other dope podcasts like Aftergate, check out their podcast hub at defylifepods.com. Also, a reminder, Aftergate is on all major podcast streaming services from Apple Pods to Spreaker, Spotify, iHeart. You name it, we're out there. Lastly, if you want that branded apparel, if you want that Aftergate t-shirts, go to that website, defylifegear.com. And now let's bring it back to our guest, Miss Angel Kelley. Welcome back. So as always, before we jump into kind of who you have been and who you are now, we always like to ask our guests just a general question about a relevant issue and kind of get their opinion. Considering your seat, most recently, President Biden had made a pivotal comment when he announced that his nomination for Supreme Court Justice was going to be an African-American woman, and in many ways fulfilling a promise that he made on the trail when he was running for president. So I appreciate that consistency. Just love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, like you, I appreciate that he made a promise during the campaign and he's staying true to it. I was waiting to hear whether or not he was going to continue with that promise, because you know how politics can be. You know, people say a lot of things to get in office and don't necessarily follow through. But you know, sometimes they realize it's not as easy as they thought it might be, and that necessitates a change in position. But no, he kept his promise, and he's been very vocal about it from the beginning, and very transparent about that. And so I applaud him for that. It's a fine time to have a Black woman on the Supreme Court. One might say it's been overdue. And I also have to commend him on the nominations that he's made. He, before he even was sworn in, I think it was by the end of last year, he went into office in 21, so it was the end of 2020, that his legal counsel announced that they wanted diverse applicants, that they wanted people from a public defender background or civil rights attorneys, that this was going to be his focus, and it has been his focus. I don't have the numbers, but they're readily easily to obtain, but it's been very clear in every slate of judicial nominees that he makes that, you know, they are people of color and that they are bringing those professional experiences to the courts that have traditionally not been appointed to the court. You know, you'll get plenty of prosecutors, but you won't see defense attorneys. He's making sure that that voice is included in the room and that it's available to the people who come to the courts, that diverse perspective. And so that having a Black woman's lived experience and professional experience in that court, the Supreme Court, in discussing of cases is tremendous. And I think that she, whoever she will be, of all of those people that have been mentioned, will be outstanding Supreme Court justices. And it's never an issue of their qualifications, because they wouldn't be where they are now if they weren't qualified. And so it is, there should be no question about their qualifications.
I knew I asked the right person, the right question. Thank you. That's all I'll do.
Appreciate the candidness, which actually is a great segue into our next question, because we want for folks who are listening to obviously learn about the journey to who you've become now. So let's start with your official role now, but then take us through sort of like the milestones. Did you always know this is where you wanted to get to in life? You said you knew you wanted to be a lawyer, and obviously there's all types of lanes within legal field. So kind of give us the hopscotch version of how you leave Colgate, and then how you end up where you're at, from education, career choices, regions of the country, because you've bounced around a few cities. Give us that flashback.
Okay. So I went to Georgetown, and I went to Georgetown thinking I wanted to do international law. I had fallen in love with international travel from Colgate. I told you I went to Japan. I went to China, studied in Taiwan and visited Korea. So I just thought international law was where I wanted to go, even though I had told you previously that I enjoyed doing mock trials. When I got to Georgetown and I was sitting in, class sizes 50, 75 deep in my section, and looking at all the other students there who also wanted to do international law, I just really didn't think that I fit in. And there was a point when I was in law school that I thought about not continuing in law school, because it just was not fulfilling to me. It wasn't satisfying. And I really needed to find something that was going to get me through those 3 rigorous years. And what was happening in the world at that time was, the Rodney King incident. And so what I identified that I wanted to do while in law school was to prosecute police officers for excessive use of force, police corruption. And so I wanted to work at the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division criminal section that did exactly that. What I started working for the Department of Justice International Criminal Division International Affairs Office, and we dealt with treaties and extradition requests, and that wasn't quite it. But I continued in a sort of misguided way, did not try to transition over to the Civil Rights Division. So if I had to say I had a regret, that would be one of them, because it would have, I think, improved my chances in being hired for that had I done that while there. But I didn't, and so I didn't get accepted into the honors program. And then I left Georgetown, trying to figure out, what it was that was going to make my life's work fulfilling. And so I ended up at the Legal Aid Society Juvenile Rights Division, and I represented children and juvenile children alleged of committing criminal offenses, charged as juvenile delinquents. And so I did that for a number of years, and that work was very rewarding, but also very emotional. And that I did not want to spend my career sort of with that emotional stress constantly. But I also wanted to go on to do jury trials and try cases in a different arena. And I moved on then to the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And I would say that was one of the best jobs that I ever had, because they were willing to pay for a good defense. And if that meant retaining experts or doing multiple depositions, I could do that. We didn't settle cases, we tried cases. So I got a lot of excellent jury trial experience, both in state and federal court. The odd part about that is, because I had some experience with criminal work, I ended up representing police officers at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. And so I had represented officers and tried cases where I believe that the cases should be tried and that there may have been frivolous lawsuits brought against police officers. And I settled those cases where I believe that they should have been settled because there was inappropriate conduct by the police officers. So here, on the one hand, I got myself through law school thinking I was going to prosecute police officers. But then, some years later, I ended up representing police officers and still have some lifelong friendships with some of them. So I really feel that my life experience, I've been able to sort of do both sides and have opinions and thoughts about both sides, but then do the good work that's required. So it was after a number of years there, I moved up to Massachusetts in 2005. So I was able to go on to teach at Harvard Law School, do clinical teaching there for 2 years. And then I went to the U.S. Attorney's Office where I did prosecution, federal criminal prosecution. And so that's when I went onto the bench in 2009 for the first time to the state district court in Massachusetts. Spent about 3.5 years there. And then I went to the Superior Court and spent about 8.5 years there before being appointed to the U.S. District Court in Boston. So that's been my career path. And what else did you want to know about that? I think there was another part to your question, Jerry.
Well, no, you covered it. You just did it in the reverse order, but that's fine because we were able to follow sort of like not only the various pivots and the promotions, but I was particularly interested in the areas of law that your career has sort of taken on, and was where you're at today always something that you envisioned as being one of those milestones, or did it come as something that you at this point had unexpected?
So as an advocate for disadvantaged groups. So when I was at Legal Aid, I was advocating for children. I was advocating for families that found themselves in the court system. And so those are usually voices that are unheard and, often ignored. And when you're a woman of color, a young woman of color attorney, you're often ignored, not heard, and marginalized. And so it was important to me then to be able to give voice and be an advocate for. And so from that perspective, you were seeking justice, and it would always be appealing to be sure to be someone who can deliver justice. So, maybe in the back of my mind, I thought, it would be nice, to be a judge, but I always just thought I would be an advocate. It really wasn't until I moved to Massachusetts and I met some judges here who planted that seed for me and asked me, when I was making my transitions and moves here in Mass, had I ever considered it? And so that's when I thought, it would be nice to be that guardian of justice, to make sure that voices can be heard in the courtroom. And so that's what I'm there to do now. And that's what I've been doing for the past, 12, 13 years.
Guardian of justice. I love that. That's dope. I am curious though, for someone who is very naive to the process. When you are moving from judge position to judge position, and it's referred to as a nomination, is it an application process, or people are actually identifying you without you being necessarily aware of, and they're just kind of snatching you and saying, hey, we want to move you here?
State to state, it varies. So some states are elected positions and some are appointed. In Massachusetts, in both state and federal level, it's an application process done, screened by a committee of approximately 20 or so practitioners and judges. Then there's interviews in various stages of the process. So, for example, for this federal position, I had to interview with the committee. Then after the committee, interview with the senators. Then after the senators, having to interview with the White House. So those are 3 different stages of interviews that you'd have to advance through. And then that's just before a nomination would be made. Let me think about whether the vetting process is before, the background investigation and the vetting process is before an actual nomination. So you have to go through all of that. And I submitted my application in January of 2021, and it was May. They were moving very swiftly, and the administration was clear that they wanted to make the appointments. In fact, they asked for applicant names to be submitted, even though Massachusetts didn't follow it. They wanted names on the desk the day before the president was sworn in.
Wow.
And Massachusetts started its process at that time. So President Biden was ready to rock and roll and live true to his promise early on. But it is that process in Massachusetts. Other states, it could be that way, that you get a telephone call and they say, you know, we want to appoint you to whatever position.
And is it customary that you just sort of accept it? Because you'd be like, hell nah, I'm not doing that.
Well, I've never heard of someone turning it down. I suspect it's a great honor to be reached out to like that. I've even talked to judges on my court who have, you know, may have gone through a similar type process, had not been thinking about it until someone reached out.
Interesting. Fascinating.
So I had to apply. Nobody was calling me.
Well, you applied and they accepted. They said, yes, we want her. We want her.
And I had no political connections. Nobody was garnering favor or doing someone else a favor by appointing me.
That's what I wanted to ask. Is there, you know, without calling it a campaign, you know, is that, I guess, par for the course when somebody applies for that you sort of try to align your folk and get you know, get the powers that be to acknowledge that there's other folks rooting for you? Or is it truly a process that, you know, is done fairly, where your application is really vetted, you know, in the same way as any other application?
So in the state court system, there's actually rules that say there's no lobbying. So you can't have people lobby on your behalf. But there is a portion of the application process where you do need to have your letters of recommendation. So for example, you needed 10 letters of recommendation by the time that they decided to interview. So let's say you could get a call on a Monday saying, we'd like to interview you in the next 2 weeks. Can you prepare your, you know, have 10 letters of recommendation submitted in advance of that. So now you do need to mobilize the people. And there were bar associations for the federal position that did voice their support for my nomination. But as you can see from the news regarding the Supreme Court vacancies, that there are different groups pushing different
agendas.
Yeah, exactly.
Fascinating. So we also like to get a sense of perspective. So if you had the opportunity to talk to Angel Kelley when she was 17, 18, entering Colgate, what advice would you give her? And then also, if you had the opportunity to talk to Angel Kelley when she was graduating Colgate, what advice would you give her?
Probably the same advice.
Okay.
I would say, you know, rise above trifling people. Because you're going to encounter some trifling people and trifleness in college. You know, just rise above it, stay out of the fray on that. No need to partake. You know,
That's when you study abroad. That's when you're like down for a semester
or two.
You know, just to think about those things. But when I was going through Colgate, there wasn't social media. So I think a lot depends on whether or not that 18, 19-year-old Angel who's at Colgate has social media available or not. So my advice to people now would be a bit different, which is, or it would be additional advice, which is just be real careful what you do on social media. I don't engage in that now, but there are just a lot of things that can come back to bite you. And, you know, if you're ever going for a job interview, you should know that they're going to Google you before you walk in that door, or before they even decide whether or not to interview you. And so, you know, if your Facebook page shows you being ridiculous, or, you know, you're saying and doing ridiculous things, that's a reflection of you. So I would just, you know, guard your reputation well. treat everyone with respect, because you never know who's going to be in a position to hire you. Like Jerry hired me for the double discovery program. You just, never know those connections you're going to make in the future. You don't want to burn any bridges. And so that would be the advice I would have given myself back then. Stay away from those trifling brothers,
Trifling brothers. It went from trifling people to trifling brothers.
Real quick, the same sentence.
We're gonna let that go. We're gonna let that go. And I appreciate that last comment also about social media, particularly considering that, one, we know alumni are listening, but we also know students are listening. And so for students who are listening to this particular episode, I think that's always good to hear in terms of that particular advice, because I don't think they take that into consideration enough. So
and just beyond social media, when she makes reference to protecting your reputation, and at a young age, when you're still trying to define who you are, it can sound easier than what it truly is, because you're going through a growth spurt. Those 4 years of Colgate are there's a lot going on, and trying to figure out who the hell you are without social media. And so there's a lot of ways to ruin your reputation outside of social media. We ran the line on that in just being boisterous and outspoken in class, and how that carried us, our reputation beyond our reputation. I remember going into classes first day of class and professors being like, "Oh, so you're Mr. Dubois." I'm like, what does that mean? And so, yes, excellent advice.
I remember, I guess either before Colgate or Colgate time, Vanessa Williams. You remember the first Black Miss America, that she made a poor decision and photographs that she took. And, from that experience, I always thought, well, if I ever want to be somebody someday, I've got to be proud of the decisions that I've made. And so I just can't make bad decisions. And luckily for her, she was able to recover from that and have a very successful and robust career. But, that was a very difficult time for her to overcome that when that came to light. And so that was always something that was in the back of my mind. But I talk to students a lot. I teach a lot. And I often get asked to speak at, to young lawyers or young students. So the things that I do tell them is about, guarding your reputation and careful in social media. But I would say that the other thing that I do say when I speak to attorneys of color, and so I'll apply it in this case to students of color at Colgate, is not to screen yourself out from opportunities. And sometimes we let the noise in our head get so loud that we screen ourselves out, that I'm not good enough for that. I'm not, why would someone think that I was good enough to hire me for that? And if you're not in it, you're never going to win it. And so you put yourself out there, and you got to have, enough self-respect and pride in yourself to apply. I had a job that I enjoyed. And so I could have stayed in my job and done nothing else, but I put myself out there and applied. And sure, there are a lot of qualified people out there who could have been selected, but it was my time. And there's a good amount of luck, good fortune, timing, in politics that all play into it. And you never know what's happening around you. So you really got to put yourself in it and stop screening yourselves out. And, I've learned of this term of the imposter syndrome, dial that noise back in your head. And, got people who are around you who are just giving you that static, dial them back to. So that would be the advice I give.
Okay, have you, I know this is all, still very recent, but have you already set your sights on what's next? It just seems like there's gotta be.
No, I'm living my dream right now. This is where I wanted to be. So I have no aspirations for anything more than this. Okay. I'm going to ride this out.
That's what's up. Before we bounce out of here, is there, part of why we do this is so that our network, our guests have an opportunity to amplify any whether it's a cause, opportunity, initiative, anything you want to promote so that our listeners, our network who do listen will have an opportunity to, whether it's look up a website or take advantage of whatever you want to share to the network. Here's your opportunity to brag or boast about anything you would like to talk about.
The things that are really important to me now, it's not something to brag or boast about, or but what's important is for me, because I'm a judge and I'm in the legal system, and it's called a justice system for a reason. And so I believe in equal justice. I don't believe it has always been equal, and I believe that is still a pursuit of ours. And so I urge everyone, now that there's been this new racial reckoning, racial equality, that everyone ask themselves, what are they doing to advance that? And figure out a way in which they contribute, regardless whether they're in the legal field or not. Because I think that there are ways to bring racial equity in all fields, to leverage your position to your company to say, what are you doing to advance, to help? And so that's what I would urge people to do. Take a look at Roxbury Youth Works. It's Roxbury Youth Work, Inc. It's in Boston, and I'm on the board there. And they work with adolescents that are involved with the court. And so they have one of the programs for sexually exploited children, children involved in DYS or youth service.
I have to ask this question. When was the last time you were back at Colgate?
I went back for my 30th reunion. So 2019.
Okay.
Which was also their 200th year reunion.
Yep.
That was the last one they had due to the pandemic.
Right.
I was there. You guys weren't.
That is correct. That is correct. I do expect.
I did see you in Miami that same year, shortly after.
Facts.
Right before we got shut down.
Facts. So there's another big reunion this coming June in 2022. We're gonna continually try to promote that as we go through this year. Hopefully we'll see you and some of your friends up there as well. Would you like to say anything before we get out of here?
Well, I will tell you that my chambers were interviewing for law interns for the summer, and I noticed one of the resumes is a Colgate graduate, and she might be getting an offer this week.
Fantastic. Colgate love, go Gate.
And to intern at your office, you have to be a graduate, or can you be a matriculating student?
She's a law student. So the interns are in school, and the law clerks are after you've graduated. Okay. And I hire experienced attorneys. Yeah.
Excellent. That's dope.
Well, on that note, Your Honor, it has been an honor.
Yes.
And thank you. Your message of, what are you doing and leverage your position, I think is something that should resonate with a lot of people, and hopefully people heard you. But I really am thankful because I really appreciate the vulnerability of sharing your story about your grandmother. I thought that was amazing to hear. The candor in which you spoke, thank you. And this has been another episode of Aftergate, the kickoff to season 2. Bang. Thanks to our guests. Thanks to our listeners. As always, Aftergate is powered by the Defy Life Network. Make sure you check out future podcasts. And we are on all your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Peace, family.
Night.
Good night. Thank you.
Shh. You hear that? Listen closer. That, my friend, is the deafening sound of focus. It drowns out all the useless noise that can clutter the moment. Naysayers don't exist. Haters? Smaters? The peanut gallery? Who's that? When you in your zone, all that noise and all that buzz is just elevator music. So, enjoy your journey, focus on your goal, and bask in the quiet roar that is progress. Because when it's your time to shoot that shot, spit that verse, or close that deal, the only voice that matters is yours. Defy Life.